All right, next item this evening is an update from Chief Clark from our police department on the townwide policing efforts. I had asked the chief, he was going to be here this evening to discuss another topic as well. So I had asked if he would be kind enough to give us an update on what's been going on in town recently and the police department's efforts, because as you know, we hear a lot about some of the incidents around town in terms of break-ins, motor vehicle issues, kind of an uptick in things. And so I wanted the chief to at least have an opportunity to let us know what they're working on or what they're doing as much as he can tell us, because I know the police department is doing everything they possibly can to help us out, but I really thought it would be worthwhile to hear straight from the chief what's going on. So Chief, it's all yours.
Great, thanks for having me. The car breaks and stolen cars continue to be a major problem. As of the other day, we're up to 265 car breaks. The stolen cars are a little less than what we had last year, but overall, larcenies are up. There's been a number of major incidents that have occurred around the area. New Britain last night had a vehicle with juveniles in it, ram a police car and totaled the police car. The biggest challenge for us is apprehension, and I'll give you a couple of examples. Last night, an officer spotted a car that was listed in an intelligence bulletin as being stolen and being involved in car breaks and some other crimes. Seen on Cedar Street. The officer followed it, attempted to stop it, and then the car took off. And again, for the pursuit policy, there was no chase. Last week, we received more information from New Britain about a car that was involved in car breaks. The officer was checking a residential area. This was about 6 o'clock in the morning, spotted the car, backed into somebody's driveway, and there was a suspect going through the car in the driveway. The suspect spotted the officer, jumped into the rear passenger seat. The officer pulled in the driveway in an effort to block in the car, and the car took off across the front lawn and out onto Maple Avenue and fled. Again, our pursuit policy prohibits us from chasing. We're working on a couple of things right now, one of which is really involves the catalytic converters, because we're seeing a huge uptick in that. We've had a number of vehicles with the catalytic converter stolen, which includes the senior center buses, which are now parked in the parking lot of the police department to keep them safe. There's something we're working on now. Obviously, I can't get into it because I don't want to give up our trick that we're trying to do to try to apprehend the catalytic converter thieves. To date, we're up to 1,300 location checks. The officers are out there checking these areas, the commercial areas that are prone to catalytic converter thefts, the residential areas that are prone to car breaks and stolen cars, not to mention the fact that they're also responding to their calls for service. So, I mean, the challenge is immense. They're doing the best they can. But again, it's just difficult when you see the vehicle, you try to stop it and it takes off, and there's really nothing you can do. And I don't want to be cynical here, but it's almost like we're getting good at letting people go, because essentially that's what you're doing. You see them, and then you make that effort, and they take off, and they know you're not going to chase them. And again, it feels like, I'm at the theater in a one-act play and we never get out of the first act. It's the same thing over and over again. At the regional level, I can tell you I have a meeting tomorrow. The Office of Policy and Management is putting up $5 million to the cities will be really the epicenters. So the cities will get the money, and then they're going to create regional task forces to deal with the increase in violence and the stolen cars and car breaks. So I have a meeting with Chief Thody from Hartford tomorrow with a number of the suburban chiefs that are going to be a part of the task force But again, task forces are good. Don't get me wrong, but there has to be follow up on the other end. I mean, if we're going to designate the money, the personnel resources to combat this problem, and we make arrests, there has to be follow up on the other end. I want a return on my investment. If I'm going to do that, then I want to know that there's going to be follow through with the courts, that there's going to be penalties, there's going to be consequences, there's going to be accountability. So that's going to be my question tomorrow at the meeting. This task force is great. It brings everybody together at a regional level to combat the crime. So we need that follow up on the other end from the courts. If we don't get that, then what's the point of just arresting people and not getting any return? It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Chief, I know you and I talked about this, but explain to everybody what's happening realistically. You're catching people, and what's happening when they go to court.
It's first of all, it's very difficult to catch people because they're just back in my day, and I'll give you an example. I had a stolen car one day, and I'm not saying this is right, but this was many years ago. I was a patrolman. We had a stolen car out of Caldors. We're at 5 in Raleigh. And I chased the stolen car from the Berlin Turnpike all the way to the Colt building on 91. I mean, and that's what went on. And I'm not advocating we return to that, but because we're not able to make those apprehensions, they're not getting into the system. And the state is very good about saying, well, arrests are down. Well, yeah, they're down because we're not making the apprehension because of the restrictions that have been placed on us.
Right.
But those that are getting into the system, there's no consequences. There's a feeling that they want services in lieu of incarceration or punishable consequences. That's the underlying feeling right now. It's about social services, providing services, and their kids are not even getting that. They're essentially getting nothing, and because they're getting nothing, we're just setting them up for failure for their adult years. If we don't control the problem now as juveniles, they're going to learn that they can get away with this, and they're going to carry that into their adult years when they're going to get arrested, and then they're going to enter the adult system, and then they're going to get incarcerated. So what they're trying to prevent, they're actually setting these kids up for that in the future. So if the feeling is we got to deal with it now, we'll deal with it. But they're just not doing that from where I sit. I mean, there's been a lot of public outcry. There's a lot of frustration, and not a lot is happening. I just don't see it. And the frustration level is through the roof. It's through the roof with law enforcement. It's through the roof with the public. And the public is getting extremely concerned about their safety. And I'll give you some data on pistol permits. In a typical year, we do about 140 to 150 pistol permits a year. Last year, we did 200. This year, we are already up to 381 pistol permits. So that gives you an indication of how people feel. And I know a lot of people in town, and I see some of the names coming through, and I would never imagine that these people would ever get a firearm or a pistol permit. You're seeing elderly couples get pistol permits, young kids, 21, 22, people in their 70s, and everybody in between are getting pistol permits. So there's a general concern for their safety, and this is the result. Everybody's getting a firearm. And more firearms out there. I mean, that's a whole nother debate. Most people back in the day got firearms for recreational shooting. Not now. It's not recreation. It's about personal safety and personal protection. And that just gives you an indication that people feel as though the police can't protect them, nor can the criminal justice system. So they need to arm themselves to protect themselves. That's a huge jump in pistol permits. And I think it's going to continue. And if we don't get things done the way we think we should get it done to solve the problem, this is just going to continue. It's not going to stop. And as bad as it is right now, this is my personal opinion. I don't even think we've reached the pinnacle yet. I think it's going to get worse than what we're seeing now, because I don't see a whole lot of things being done right now.
Right. We have a bunch of hands up, Chief. Do you mind if I have some
Sure.
people chime in?
Sure.
Mr. Chapman, you were first.
Yes, I just want to have Steve explain that, yes, the state would like to see, and the courts would like to see social services to be the primary responder, but explain, Steve, if you would, how social services departments even know what's going on. Aren't they having the same problem you're having with identifying? Because you're the identifiers when you pull these people over, but if you're not pulling them over, how would social services even know about them?
You're correct. They're not going to know. So unless we make the apprehension and get them into the system, unless, there's other referrals from schools or DCF, you're exactly right. They're not going to know. And one of the things I think it's important for everybody to understand, because there's been a lot of discussion about juvenile detention and how, kids get put into detention. And there's a feeling that I've heard a few things that, maybe the police need to be retrained because they don't know how to fill out the form to get these kids in detention. The detention protocols have changed since 2017, 2018, and it is very difficult to get a kid into detention. And just to give you an example, and this is the law, no child may be placed in detention unless a judge determines, based on all available facts, that there is probable cause to believe that the child has committed the acts alleged. I mean, you arrest somebody, you got to have probable cause. So you got to have that there to begin with. And there is no appropriate, less restrictive alternative available. Well, what is that? There's either detention or you let them go. I don't know what the other alternatives are that are available. I don't think there is any. It's either detention or they get released to their parents, guardians, or DCF, or who is ever responsible for the child. Now, things that they should consider that they don't is, a strong probability that the child will run away prior to a court hearing. I mean, we had that here with a juvenile that we arrested and was a suspect in stolen cars. We had actually arrested him for a marijuana charge. He was awarded the state. He was in DCF control, called DCF. They came down and basically said, he's a runaway. We have no control of this kid. And our response was, well, based on the criteria, we can't put him in detention. So we're releasing him into your custody because you're responsible for him. So we did that. And what happens? He runs away. And 3 days later, he's found murdered in Hartford. He was shot and killed. So there's an example. Probability that the child will commit or attempt to commit other offenses injurious to the child or to the community. I mean, these are things that need to be added into the protocols. So, when they come up, it makes it a little easier to get these kids in detention. But the bottom line is there is no political will, and I'm not trying to play politics here. I'm just saying it like it is. There is no political will up at the Capitol to incarcerate or put kids in detention. There's not. And they're just letting them out and running freely, causing havoc and putting other people's at risk. We had an incident here in town about a month ago. Poor guy's pumping gas up on the Berlin Turnpike. He's pumping gas. Juvenile comes up to him, engages him in conversation. Another kid comes up, sucker punches him in the back of the head, knocks him to the ground, and then the three juveniles start beating him. They try to steal his car, but he didn't have the key fob in the car. He had it in his pocket, so they couldn't get the car. But they just stole articles out of the car and fled in 2 other stolen cars. So we're not immune to it, but it's frustrating. It really is.
Okay, thank you, Chief. We have a few more hands up. Counselor Mankey?
Yeah, Chief, I know this council several months ago sent a letter to our state representatives and our state senator asking for action or some kind of a change in the law so we could kind of combat this. Was anything done from your point of view at the state capitol this term to make this better from your perspective?
No, nothing was done. And really, you know, Newington was at the beginning of that. I think we were probably one of the first communities that did that, and there's been a number of others that have followed suit. You know, you had Glastonbury, they did it recently. There's been a few others. So, I mean, I don't know how many months ago that was. That had to be, you know, 6 months ago that we did that. And
I believe it was
all the
a while
public
ago.
outcry. Yeah, nothing has changed. The only thing that has changed is things have gotten more serious. That's what's changed.
Right. And just for my own edification or knowledge, did any of our senators or representatives contact you for your opinion?
Yeah, there was one that contacted me, yes.
Okay, thanks. Only one out of the four, right?
Well, there's Gary Turco contacted me, and then I have spoken, and actually Kerry Woods met with the mid-state chiefs to talk about the problem.
Thank you.
Counselor Braverman? Sharon, your hand's up. Did you want to speak?
Hi. Chief, I have a question. When a citizen, yes. How do I?
Go ahead, Sharon.
She's on mute.
Yeah, she just remuted. We were hearing you, Sharon. There you go.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait. All right.
Go ahead.
Wait a minute. Am okay now?
I can hear you.
All right. So, Chief, when a citizen applies for a permit, is there training required? Am I still muted? Wait a minute.
You have to go through an NRA familiarization class. Are you proficient in the use of firearms? It's not a proficiency. You're not tested on the firearm use as you are going through the laws and safe use of the firearm and familiarization, but there is no proficiency.
Okay, so anybody, there is to get the license, you have to.
There is a background
what?
check. There is a background check.
No outstanding warrants,
Right. There is a background check. Yeah.
Right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, Deputy Mayor Bedrejko?
First, just kind of following up on what Councilor Mankey had indicated. The state legislators did, kind of announce that they did take action, but it was like creating a task force to study the problem and trying to penalize some of the adults who entice the youth into crime, but nothing was done about the youth themselves. So I can't quite share their enthusiasm for what was accomplished as a result of our letter. But secondly, I was reading about the $5 million that Governor Lamont set aside for the funding to help cities and towns address gun violence, car thefts, and overdoses. But according to Chief Thody, the money has to be spent on overtime and personnel. So, like you said, I mean, I don't care. Newington can hire another 100 police officers on the street, but if all you can do is wave the peace sign and throw roses at these people, I mean, more staffing is not going to help unless you can, the officers can do something to stop the problem. So I do hope that tomorrow your meeting will be a little bit more productive, and perhaps the state and Governor Lamont will loosen up the funding to enable action to be taken rather than just hire more officers whose basically hands are tied.
Yeah, I mean, the other part of that is everybody's hurting for staffing. You got to have staffing to throw at the problem. And yeah, to your point that, if you do it, you got to have, follow up to that, especially in the courts. But, everybody is struggling for staffing. Hartford is struggling. I mean, we're struggling, and it's just, we have a serious problem, but I don't have the staffing to be able to, put a lot of emphasis on that problem. I mean, we have 4 vacancies now with 2 people out hurt, and within the next 6 months, I can end up with another 4. It's going to be devastating to our department, and we're going to have to make some tough decisions if we're not able to replace these people with the services that were being provided. It's just, something's got to give. Either one, we lower our hiring standards, which obviously we don't want to do, or 2, we cut back on the services that we're providing. Something has to give because we can't find anybody. One of those vacancies is over a year old. It's just, we're hurting. And if we don't start replacing the people that retire, as more people retire, our staffing is going to be critical. It's going to be very serious if we're not able to replace those. Nobody wants to get into the profession now. Officers have been vilified, and nobody wants to enter the profession for a variety of reasons. And so it's difficult.
I just have one more, if you can comment. It seems to me that, people are talking, when you talk about juvenile crime, people are thinking that there's these, 13 and 14-year-olds, having, a couple beers and riding around, trying to open cars. But to me, I think, hasn't this escalated a little bit beyond just juvenile crime? This seems very methodic, very organized, and it's increasingly violent in their actions. I mean, I'm not sure it can just all be classified now as juvenile crime.
You're correct. It's serious. It's escalated. I mean, there was an individual in Hartford the other day where he confronted some suspects trying to steal his car or breaking into his car, and he was shot at. There was a woman in Glastonbury that was shot at. There's the incident that I described that happened at a gas station on the Berlin Turnpike. It's escalating, and it has been for several months. It's getting more and more serious. I mean, you had a police cruiser in New Britain last night. They rammed the police car. I mean, that's the extent that this has gone. And, again, as it's escalated and we've seen it, and I for the life of me, I don't understand why more affirmative action isn't being taken at the state level up at the Capitol. I'm just, it's beyond, I just don't understand. How far does it have to go before any action is taken? This problem's not going away. It's not. In fact, it's going to get worse if no action is taken.
Well, Chief, we see it getting worse each and every day. Like you said, we've just today I saw on press conference about the pursuit from, I believe it started in Hartford and went into West Hartford.
Yes, and I can tell you that car was in town last night. That car that was involved in that crash, that car that was involved in that crash was in town last night and was seen by one of our officers on the midnight shift. So again, our officers are out there. They're checking. They're doing everything that's being asked of them, but their hands are tied, and it's frustrating. It really is. But yeah, I mean, there's an example where, the car was involved in some major crimes. It fled from the police and it crashed.
Yep. All right, I see Counselor Minor, you have your hand up. Go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just real quick, Chief. I mean, the example last night that you're referring to with the Infinity that crashed in West Hartford, those three were not identified by name, but they were identified by age, and they're all adults now.
Yep.
And those, to me, would be the graduates of our juvenile programs that have just now made it into the big leagues. And my concern is, as you stated, that they are escalating and have continued to escalate over the last several months. That, Glastonbury, a shot was fired at the house. The Hartford incident that you referenced from the car last night was, shot somebody directly. So the issue comes down to what, if anything, can we do in the short term to try to do, there has to be some, is it, sharing of intelligence between agencies? Is it, I know we've had the discussion in the past of using aviation to be able to remotely watch these individuals and try to follow where they're going and catch them in a safe environment in that way. And we heard directly from the state police, I believe it was a colonel that was on one of our calls with us, that said that that was not something that was viable. Is that the best way to try to escalate this on a state level, is to try to utilize those assets better?
I think you gotta remove them from the street. I mean, our hands are tied in our ability to make apprehensions. So my thing is, and you gotta consider using ankle monitors, and you gotta put kids into detention to keep the public safe, and in some cases, keep them safe from themselves. You gotta take them out of that environment. You can't, they're beyond anyone's control. Their parents can't control them. In the case that I described to you, DCF couldn't control him and he ended up dead. These kids are uncontrollable and they're going to continue to act out and put others at risk. And when they've demonstrated that, then you got to take the necessary steps to keep them away from the public and causing harm. And whether it's an ankle bracelet, and if they cut it off, then they go to detention. If it's, a number of car breaks or car thefts or whatever, and they pose a risk to the public, they go to detention. And then if you say you want services, well, then get them the services. Use detention for punishable consequences along with services. Don't do one or the other, do them together. But you got to keep them away from the public to keep the public safe, because obviously people are being put at risk. And, people feel that way. You could see that with the number of pistol permits.
Absolutely.
Now, the case of West Hartford, Chief, I think it was last week, if I remember correctly, mid-afternoon on New Britain Avenue, where a car was carjacked with an infant in the car. That press conference was the first time that I can recall in recent memory that I believe it was the captain of West Hartford Police Department stated that they were getting in front of a judge that night for detention of that juvenile. Do you know what the outcome of that was? Is that something that they're now opening their doors to more, or is that just an anomaly just by the severity of that case?
I don't know. When you have somebody, I mean, that's a pretty serious crime. That goes beyond, that's kidnapping. In those circumstances, you'd fill out the take into custody order, present it to a judge. They're talking about keeping data on that now, how many times the police fill out the form for detention, and how many times they're accepted and how many times they're denied by a judge. They're going to start keeping track of that. But when the crimes are serious, you fill out that order, it's up to the judge. And the criteria that's used is, as I described previously, that's the criteria. So it's up to the judge. It's out of the police's hands. Once we fill out that form and hand it off to a judge to review, it's out of our hands and it's in the hands of the judge, whether or not they want to put the kid in detention or let him go.
All right, thanks, Chief.
All right, next we have Counselor Nagel. Go ahead, Dave.
Hey, thank you, Mayor. Steve, it all comes back to, and I know this is a difficult question to answer in some respects, what can we do as a council? What can individuals do in their small way to try to open the eyes of our state legislators and the governor and the courts to assist you and other police departments to get something accomplished, at least to lessen this situation? I know you've said it's going to get more serious. Do you have any suggestions, or do you have anything that will really make some impact, you think?
Beyond what we've already done, we've done everything. I mean, going back 6 months ago, I don't know how much more you can do. You've wrote a letter. We've talked about it. It's whether or not they have the political will to make the necessary changes that need to be made. And with all this public outcry, this council, mayor, town manager advocating for change here, and all the other communities that have been involved, and yet still nothing gets done. So I don't know what more anybody can do. I think it's up to the citizens now. Petitions, whatever, voice your concerns. That's how change is going to get made. It's just, I don't know what more this council can do, what more I can do. We've said everything that needs to be said. And again, not a lot is getting done. And that's what is so frustrating. And I hear it here in the hallways from the officers. You just hear it. And it's, the wind has been taken out of their sails. The enthusiasm level, I've seen a drop, because it's like, what's the point? It's just, it's troubling. It really is. And I don't know if we don't get our act together, and really it's a societal problem. It's everybody's problem, because we're going to own this, and we're owning it now. If we don't get our act together, it's going to get even worse than it is now. And people are going to lose their lives. We've seen it, and it's going to keep happening and keep happening. And when is enough going to be enough? And it extends beyond that. It's, these kids are operating these cars recklessly. I mean, is it going to take, a mom with her toddler in the car seat driving through an intersection when one of these kids in a stolen car blows a light and buries the car into the side of the car with the toddler in it and kills the toddler and the mother? Is that going to get us to make the changes that need to be made? What's it going to take? I'm frustrated. Everybody's frustrated. And again, for the life of me, I don't understand why things aren't being done. The problem is right there. Find a solution. If you're not going to work on a solution, step aside and let somebody do it so it can get done. Because if it doesn't, people are going to continue to get seriously hurt, and in some cases, they're going to die. And that's a fact. We've seen it, and it's going to continue.
I know, but I'll say it anyway. I'm sure everyone here on the council shares your frustration, and whatever frustration we have, I'm sure nowhere compares to the frustration that you and your department has. They're facing this up front. Is it a lesson in futility for us to draft another letter to our state legislature and to the governor? It sounds like that may fall on deaf ears from what you've just been saying.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the choice, and maybe at some point they will listen. I don't know what else. I don't know what more to say. It's just this is beyond anything I've ever seen in my, how long I've been doing this job, 35 years. I've never seen anything like this in my life. I haven't. And and we're dealing with all the other police reforms now that I got psychological screenings that happened on Monday and again tomorrow as part of the police accountability bill. I mean, they're focused on that, but this problem they're not so much focused on. I again, for life, me, I don't understand. And again, if things don't change, it's just going to get worse, and there's going to be more tragedies. And I'm preaching to the choir.
You definitely are. On a more minor scale, but might be helpful, the other night, a policeman came to our house saying, I noticed that we had installed a Ring doorbell camera over our garage, and we just done it. Would it, and obviously we showed him what we could to see if it would help it off and whether he could see off it. Should our local community, if they have not, contact the police, tell them that we have those kinds of devices that will assist perhaps in a small way, but maybe in a major way with various kinds of thefts or whatever may happen.
Yeah, I mean, people can do that, but I mean that now, because everybody, that's the first, when we do a neighborhood canvas, that's the first thing we ask, and that's the first thing we're looking for. So if there's a crime that we're investigating,
can inform you if they have them.
they can contact our support services division.
Mayor,
Okay, I just wanted to know if that would be helpful, if those who wish to could come forward and let you know that it is there, so they don't have to go up and down the street just to see who has some kind of camera device. It'd be better if you knew up front.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, if I may interrupt, you have a long agenda tonight. And I know this is an important topic, but I would suggest that we might want to move on at this stage of the game, unless you're not going to get through your agenda tonight.
I was thinking that too. Counselor Donahue, I know you hadn't spoken yet and had your hand up. Did you want to add something quickly?
I can't remember, Chief, you were on another show with us, and you had spoken about your frustration about going down to the Capitol and sitting in front of these guys, and it was like talking to a brick wall. I don't know if you wanted to expand on that for us again.
Yeah, I mean, I've testified for the Connecticut Chiefs Police Association on some issues, juvenile related, and again, I think it falls on deaf ears. I think when their minds have been made up and they have their agenda, that's the way they're going to lean, and that's how they're going to handle a situation. So I think it's important that the public speak up and elected officials such as yourselves to voice your concern, and that's going to get the change. You'll get more change that way than having it come from me at this point.
Which is a real shame. I mean, you're the professional.
I'd like to think so.
Thank you, Chief.
All right. Okay, I think we're all set with this topic for now. And certainly if you folks think of more questions, you can always ask the town manager to get in touch with the chief and go that route.